Good morning. We are faced with the challenge of ensuring that the substantial investment made in science and technology benefit mankind, benefit the whole of mankind. Many reasons can impact the efficacy of science and technology. Is it a question of national and international political decision-making? Is it a question of the various stakeholders coming to a compromise which would require exchanging information, dialogue and debate? Is it a question of encouraging information? Is it a question of encouraging partnership between public research body and the business sector and the non-governmental organization? Is it a question of strengthening international cooperation to facilitate the implementation of additional skills and experience? Is it a question of raising awareness and improving communications? To contribute to this analysis, I would like to share an experience that I have done in this field. And it concerns a project which I have been a part of for the last 6 years. At Roundtable, a French company of mine, we have developed a water treatment process for turbid contaminated water. The challenge was complex and stimulating. Plenty of technologies allow to treat contaminated water as long as this water is clear, but as soon as the water is to be treated is turbid, with suspended solids, things are becoming much more difficult and hazardous. Our challenge was to propose an all-in-one standalone solution able to be exploited without a sophisticated equipment, able to be used in remote places and implemented by people without any technical background. This solution is a 2-layer tablet permitting to first eliminate the particles in suspension from the water in order to make it clear, and then, in a sequential way, to treat it for disinfection. What you see in my hand is a 20-gram tablet, which is in reality a pocket-sized factory, able to produce in less than 1 hour 200 liters of safe drinking water with the only use of a vessel or a drum. We have 3 years ago spun off this technology in a startup company named Aquasur, in charge to develop this process on a worldwide basis. Today, the double-layer Aquasur tablet have been tested in more than 20 countries and is in operation in many villages located in Malagasy, Senegal, or Bangladesh. Thanks to this easy-to-use technology, low-income population of these villages have now access to safe drinking water at an affordable price. The lesson that we have learned from that experience is the following. If you want to fulfill the most essential need of the poor, like the access to safe water, you have at the same time to train and educate them, to structure and organize their community around the new technology, to ensure a sustainable economical model adapted to their local environment, and this means that in parallel to the scientific and technological development, you have to elaborate a social marketing in line with the local environment. And I would like to present you some slides illustrating the process, what I have to do. The origin of this process, we have asked 3 companies to cooperate to develop the technical process. We have created Aquasur, which is a social enterprise that has exclusivity to market worldwide this process. And we have 3 different market possibilities: the market of emergency, the market of rural development, and the mass market in poor countries. You see the double-layered tablets, and you see the water, contaminated water before treatment and after treatment. You see, it's in the case of Senegal, what is the quality of the water before treatment, and you see the very simple process that transforms it in a drinkable water. We use for that an operator. We have a treatment unit. We use tablet, but we use also hygiene promotion to really exploit completely the process. This is another example in the case of Malagasy, where you see the different steps for the process. Again, we are pumping from surface water, we are treating, and we have sales at a very low level, but it's important to ask people to pay for the water to ensure that they take it seriously. That's a small unit. We have, I mentioned the 3 countries where we have organized cooperation with different entities to ensure the exploitation and the development of this approach. We have worked with ministers, with foundation, with Rotary organization, with NGO, with UNICEF, and I assure you that to put all those people working all together is a big challenge, bigger challenge than to develop the technology itself. We have launched education to really help young to understand that water is the first step in the health process. That's in the case of Senegal. We have demonstrated that we have an drastic improvement in terms of health of the people, with reduction of diarrhea, abdominal pains, epigastric, and so on. Value creation is at 2 levels, at the level of economic, but also and mainly at the level of social. It's a low-cost product. We have developed it for emergency also, and we use the tablet with a treatment kit that can be in operation in less than 24 hours in any country of the world. You see how the kit can be used with a small vessel of 1,000 liters with a pump and a system for distribution of water. We are prepared to do that in each country now which have problems of availability of water, and we are working with different entities also for that. We have work in Mexico, Peru, Bangladesh, Haiti. That's all. To conclude, I would like to draw from this experience 6 key points that seems for me very important. First point, we must concentrate scientific and technological innovation on the major challenges facing our society, and those affecting the poorest populations should not be neglected. There are still 1.5 billion people in the world today who do not have access to drinking water. Second, even if we choose if the chosen technology is sophisticated, its implementation should be as simple as possible to enable it to benefit the greatest number of people. Third, when developing new technologies, efficiency, cost, and ecological impact must all be taken into account at the same time. Fourth, social marketing should be used when rolling out this technology, as well as user-friendly after-sales services. Fifth, business undertaking such operation should be supported by patient investors with a keen interest in humanitarian issues and by dynamic and creative managers. Six, such businesses could be supported by new types of partnership between the public and private sectors with international organizations and NGOs. To meet this challenge, any entrepreneur will need to come from a strong, successful scientific and technological background, be at the same time sensitive and aware to society expectations, and be capable of making all the necessary connection and of building cooperation. Thank you very much.
Thank you also for keeping to your time. I am delighted to welcome our panel, and also delighted to say that Professor Abdullah Dar is also staying with us for this session, and he's sat in the front row. And we'll come to him in a moment for Q&A. I'd also like to introduce our rapporteur, Zoe Kwon, who's an advisor and consultant on high-growth companies, and she will be presenting a summary of all of BioVision, which is no easy task, and she is there to my left. So to our panel, slight sort of change of pace, perhaps a bit quicker, sort of shortish presentations around the topic of science and policy serving society. To my left is Katia Shalita, who's a journalist, a consultant in communication and culture, and a television anchor and scriptwriter. To Katia's left is Professor Maged El-Shabini, who is the president of the Academy of Scientific Research and Technology, and someone who is very, very involved in science policy making here in Egypt. And to Maged's left is Professor Mohammed Hassan, recently stepped down as the executive director of the Academy of Sciences for the Developing World, a fellowship academy of scientists, old and young, from the developing countries. And Mohammed is a plasma physicist in an earlier life, I believe. So starting with Katia, and then moving down.
Okay, thank you. I would like to thank the Bibliotheca Alexandrina for this invitation. It's an honor for me to talk to you all here. And second, I would like to ask the chair, Mr. Massoud, if I can read, because Portuguese is my first language, French is my second language, Arab from Lebanon is my third language, and English is my fourth language. So I ask if I can read, because it would be better and easier for me. I would like I would like to begin this presentation by a question. Why a professional from television, video, and communication area was invited to address to a live sciences congress? And the answer is short and simple: to show how important it is to use the benefits of efficient communication to link science to society. In my 25 years experience in educational TV network in Brazil, especially in live talk shows to all publics, I have seen the great interest of people for health issues, including diseases, new therapies, nutrition, hygiene, and quality of life. As an anchor woman that I still am, but in this program, as an anchor woman of a daily and interactive talk show in a public TV channel in Rio de Janeiro, in which we used to present, to explain, and to debate about various subjects as history, art, culture, education, consumer rights, environment, entertainment, and others, the themes that used to provoke more interest from the public were, of course, music, entertainment, consumer rights and health, new therapies, and well-being. It was a live and interactive program, so we could measure the interest of the public by the number of calls and emails we received during the transmission. When the subjects were those, health, common diseases, new therapies, well-being, life quality, we used to have a substantial increase of phone calls with questions and comments. Another example is what happens in Brazil with the successful case of TV Globo TV, a member of the largest Brazilian communication network. Some of its most popular programs like Globo Repórter, Jornal Nacional, Fantástico, and even the soap operas are examples of how to communicate with efficacy and quality, good health practices, and science innovations. Why is that a surprise? Why shouldn't it be always like that? Why is people so eager to know about that, about these issues, these themes? Traditionally, scientists communicate with their peers, the scientific community, naturally, because that's their group of reference. On the other hand, mass media seeks for spectacular news to attract his public and to attract publicity. That's their business. Knowledge and information that serve people immediately is most of times overlooked. And for the society, this information can be an agent of transformation and improvement of people's lives. So, if we have scientific community communicating to its peers, mass media communicating spectacular news, and the society needing practical science knowledge to its day-to-day problems, what do we propose? We propose that scientists, communication professionals, and society hold their hands to build a strong and permanent bridge. Nobel Prize Richard Ernst told us about this yesterday, a strong and permanent bridge between science and society, investing not only in communication, but especially in efficient and accurate communication. In such a way, all this in such a way that scientific development, scientific discoveries, and science practical applications arrive in a systematic and frequent way to all people, with the emphasis in usable findings in daily life. But this is not a simple task, because there are different audiences, different needs, different vehicles and different objectives, and how to coordinate that. So, in this way, we believe that governments need to act as an inductor of this action. As a matter of fact, governments should be the most interested party, because the government finances scientific research, and it looks forward to practical results for the money spent. The government pays for public health and spends less money and receives more political dividends when the population has better health and well-being. And the mass media is usually a regulated public concession, so the government is interested in its efficacy toward the population needs. Communication has to be guided as an agent of efficient choices, efficient practices, change of attitude toward health, hygiene, nutrition, and well-being. In this way, communication joins the education path. I think Mr. Demeresco showed his action in Senegal, and you have seen what's education and this kind of action. Both must work together, and that's too in the hands of governments. We understand that the understanding of scientific knowledge and theories by simple people helps them to accept changes of habits for the benefit of their health and quality of life. In our vision, society has to press governments to do this task of coordination, communication of relevant and practical, communication of relevant and practical science, and education of science and good habits. One will reinforce the other and be the driving force to the change in health standards and science support among the people. Shukran. Thank you.
Thank you, Katia, for those opening remarks. Magid.
Well, I was not asked to make a presentation, so I will, and I didn't write something up, so I will speak from my heart immediately. You posed several questions at the beginning, and I believe the answer is all of the above, because the commitment of the government, the commitment of the scientists, and the society, and the media are needed for making interaction between the science and the society. They are, from my point of view, the two sides of the same coin. We cannot separate between both of them. The government has a commitment, as Katia was rightly saying, that the government need to put the policy, need to make the implementation, and gain the benefit of the quality of life of the people once this implementation is being done. And actually, I would like to speak about the Egyptian case, what we are doing here in Egypt. The first thing to have for science and technology to work in the society is that the strong commitment of the political leadership. And I believe for a long period of time in Egypt, there was no commitment from the leadership to do so, until a few years back, when they started saying that we need to engage the science into our daily life and get these scientists who are sitting in the lab, wearing these white coats and doing what they want, to something what we need. So they put some targets, and these targets for the society were based on the needs of the populations themselves. If we look at, for instance, this presentation on the water issue, we will find that Egypt is blessed with the Nile, but at the same time is getting very close to the poverty level in terms of water for availability for people. We are growing in number, and the water resources are getting limited and limited. So we need to have much more resources by non-traditional ways to make sure that we have enough, not for this generation, but for the generation coming next. And desalination was one of the most important targets for us. Not only that, but there is some places in Egypt, even though we have a very nice network, getting water everywhere, almost to 90% of the population, but still some people are deprived of that. And they are still dependent on water coming from the wells, and this creates problems in their health. We can look at the random areas around Cairo in different places, where you can see the buildings and the houses are always in red brick, being done in a very bad way, and the condition of the living is very bad. We need to do something about this. So we have to resort to our scientists to do something. So they came up with a different type of paint that can be replacing the regular paint and can make the structure well, can make it much more appealing for the people looking. This is something to enhance the environment, but not only the beauty, but you need also to work on the health and the water issues. So we are developing for them as well more economic ways, more things that can provide them safe water for them. These are the things that we need to provide for the society. Also for health, for instance, in schistosomiasis disease. This disease was in Egypt prevalent since the Pharaoh's time. And I like to use this example because it shows how the commitment of the government and the commitment of the science can do something at the end. This is a disease that used to be since the Pharaoh's time. I myself have made one of the program on Discovery Channel showing one of the mummies that was 3,700 years old that has an egg, and we showed the antibodies of the schistosomiasis inside that mummy. We were able, by making interaction between science and the pharmaceutical companies, to produce the drug, not $1 a tablet, but 4 tablets with 6 cents, and able to do it in a format of a syrup so that children can take it, and performed mass campaigns of millions every year. Schistosomiasis from 90% in some areas, and overall prevalence of 40%, now less than 1%. So the commitment, the interaction between society and science being involved, we're able to eradicate a problem. Currently, we are doing what is called the national campaigns. National campaigns is to bring the scientist very close to the farmer, working hand in hand, showing him what to do to increase the yield of the crops, to increase the quality of his life. The farmer then gets this information, applied. Next year he will be better, and so forth. So this is the trend we should go. I would now say that as well there is commitment on the government and there is commitment on the scientists to face the challenges. The society as well need to have its own commitments. The society need to appreciate what the scientists are doing. The society need also to show this gratitude for them, encourage them to do so. Try to make a better life for the scientist himself, improve his life, to be able to be creative and innovative. Provide them with the society, and this is, I think, the importance of the government to intervene here, is to provide the better environment for the scientists to be able to perform such tasks and to be interactive with the society. We should not, given our limited resources, be working in issues that are not related to our national needs. I think that's the first priority. We need to carefully know what is our priority in the country, what are the things we need to face, what are the things we need to work on so we are able to make a better life for our people. And I think that this is the key for how science and society interact together, how we can have fruits that everybody will be feeling, that everybody will be appreciating, and eventually there will be a better life. I think in Egypt now what we are missing, what we are needing is much more sustainable amount of funding to be able to use the brains, use the power that has been now leashed after the revolution, and everybody would like to do things. So we need to work together to break down the bureaucracy that is going on, break down some of the issues and challenges that are facing us, and make it closer between society, with all its partners like industry, NGOs, and the government to be able to work together. So and I would like to conclude with that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And finally, some opening remarks from Mohammed Hassan.
Thank you very much, Hassan. Hassan, I have 6 points.
6 points.
But do stop me
I'll wave my
whenever
pink
I
flag.
seize my time, but certainly not before I make my first point. Okay, the first point is I think we have to somehow distinguish between science for policy and policy for science. But the two are very much interrelated. The science for policy really involves designing a proper and appropriate science policies. And in my view, these can only be designed if policymakers engage the scientific leadership in the country in designing the science policies. And of course, any science policy must address the natural sciences as well as the social sciences. It must foster collaboration between the private sector and the general public. But in my view, what is really important is in any national science policy, there must be a particular emphasis on the support for the scientific community. That's why I think the title of this session is very appropriate, which is Policies for Science and Technology Development. And I think any science policy must address this. I know that many science policies do address the actual needs of the country, but they forget to address the needs of the scientific communities as well, and this I think is extremely important. And of course, the integration of the science policy into the economic development plan of a country or a region is very important, because this is the only way for a science policy to get the appropriate level of funding. Because I've seen many science policies, especially in the developing countries, that are very beautiful, but they are far away from being integrated into economic development plans. So they are not funded and they are not implemented. So this is really very important. The second point I wanted to make is usually we find in a country a science policy and an educational policy, and the two are not that much related. I think in the majority of African countries there must be a strong link between the policy for science and the policy for education. And I'm saying this because I think in any science, technology, and innovation policy in a developing country, the top priority must be the training of a new generation of science and technology leaders. This is really what we are lacking in many of our countries, leadership in science, technology, and innovation. And this can only be done if we start to think very seriously about training this new generation. And it is important to note that we have very, very critical challenges, and these challenges can only be addressed if we look at how we can apply and make use of cutting-edge science and technology, especially those interdisciplinary cutting-edge science and technology that hold the promise of solving many of the urgent problems we face in the developing world, including biotechnology, nanotechnology, information technology, what Ismail Sirajuddin yesterday called BINT, girl in Arabic. This is really important. But it is also important to notice that these technologies are truly interdisciplinary. And to be proficient in these new and cutting-edge science and technology areas, you really have to have the right education. And that's why I think we have to address how we can renew or update the educational methods that we have in schools and universities. This is extremely important. We have to teach science in a different way. We have to teach mathematics in a different way. And this sort of approach, what people in some universities call integrated approach to teaching science, is very, very fundamental to the developing countries. This approach, by the way, is now quite common in a number of American universities, including Princeton, for example. They have recently started to introduce integrated courses in science and technology, which are taught not only to the scientists, but also to those in other faculties, in arts and social sciences. So in my view, this is also very important. My third point relates to policies of international collaboration. And I think this is changing now, changing rapidly, simply because there is now rising excellence in scientific research and education in a number of developing countries. There was a mention of China, India, Brazil, and many others that are really moving very strongly in terms of excellence in science and scientific research and education. And this will definitely shape how we collaborate with these countries and with the rest of the world. So the area of South-South cooperation, North-South cooperation has to be examined, and new policies have to be designed to take the opportunity of this rising of scientific excellence in a number of developing countries. And my fourth point, I'm doing fine, right? Which is really quite fundamental for us, is policies that facilitate the provision of independent, evidence-based advice to governments and to the general public. And here I really would like to bring the important role of academies of science. Many of you heard about academies of science. They are clubs of very old men, average age 65. But it just happened that these are the best scientists in a particular country or region, or among the best scientists in a particular country or region. And it's a tremendous force to deliver proper advice to governments in issues that relate to society, especially those controversial issues. So we very recently started to energize these academies and to enable them to take a very active role in society. And fortunately, we're beginning to see fruits of that. We now have what we call the Global Network of Academies of Science in the World, IAP, which has over 100 academies of science, and the Academy of Science in Egypt is one of them, is becoming more and more active in advising governments, both at the local level, the national level, at the regional level, and the global level. And some of them have started to form clusters or groups or networks at the regional level or thematically, like the Inter-Academy Medical Panel, which is quite relevant to this meeting. But let me just mention a couple of examples where these academies can be extremely useful to society and to governments. IAP, for example, for the last few years has been issuing statements on very critical and controversial issues like stem cell, GMOs, nuclear energy, ocean acidification, climate change, and so on and so forth. IAC is another network, Inter-Academy Council, issued a few reports, very detailed reports on, for example, agriculture in Africa or energy. This really very, very thick and very detailed reports, but they have very excellent recommendations for the policymakers. And recently, IAC actually was invited by the Secretary General of the United Nations to look at the IPCC. Many of you might have heard about the IPCC report, the last one, that it contains certain mistakes. And the Secretary General of the United Nations asked IAC, this group of academies of science, to look into the rules and procedures of the IPCC. And IAC filed a very, very important report on the rules and procedures of the IPCC. This is very important because in many cases, I think government receives reports from various directions. But these reports are not subjected to peer review. And I think this is a very, very important observation to make. And I hope that in the long run, all the reports that are submitted to governments, either at the national level or the global level, should actually be peer reviewed by outstanding scientists so that the information, when it goes to the policymakers, it is an information that has been looked at by the leadership, the scientific leadership, and reviewed by the scientific leadership. Shall I stop here, or do you want me to continue?
Might be an idea, I suppose, because I can see people start to leave. I wonder if that's an indication of where we're heading.
Okay, I'll stop here.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mohammed. So thank you all for opening comments. I'm going to start with one question from me, and particularly directed to Magid and Mohammed, and then after that I'm going to encourage lots of discussion, conversation with all of you. So it says in our program that the science policy relationship is not always harmonious. And the question I'd ask our two distinguished scientists here is, one of the reasons why it's not always harmonious is that some scientists like to work within the system, and they are very much, I would characterize them as insiders, people who are helping governments with policy advice and helping governments with policy implementation. But there's a role for scientists who are on the outside, perhaps who are doing review, doing critiques. How would you characterize yourselves? Are you an insider, Mohammed, or are you an outsider?
I'm an outsider, and I don't know about him.
We'll start with you. Are you?
I'm certainly an outsider, but I just want to emphasize the point I made. I think we need both science advice from both sides. I think in the case of us, the outsiders, it is very important for the government to receive advice from a body that's completely independent, with no interest whatsoever in anything related to the government or the politics, but purely based on evidence, objective and credible advice, and nothing else. I think the government needs this sort of advice, and I truly encourage all governments to look for their own academies and try to invite them to participate in.
Were you yourself ever tempted to become an insider?
Not yet.
No?
I'm waiting for the right government to come.
Magid?
Well, if you ask me when I was working in a lab, I would never have been thought that I could become one of the part of the government or putting policy or anything of that kind. I was always working with my hand. I never thought that I will be one of the insiders. So currently, I am definitely an insider because I'm the one who's helping in putting the policy and implementing it. And at the same time, I'm also the president of the academy that Hamad mentioned, and the academy is truly independent. It has all the gray-haired scientists, as we say, the old and wisdom, as well as the young, because we are launching the Egyptian Young Academy of Science, and putting together forward the maps, the roadmaps, the strategies, as well as the statements. And we contribute in the international arena at the IAP, and this is the think tank where we provide the government with the expertise. So we provide the government with the expertise and the roadmap, and we try to make it as concise as possible, with short recommendation, very clear, so we can follow up on it. We are not very much interested in huge studies. We are much interested in shorter one, identifying the problem exactly, what are the recommendations need to be done, and then we build our implementation plan based on that. We did that for the textile industry. We did that for all the problem we are facing. I'm not the one to talk about it so much, but I'm definitely an insider. I'm enjoying now this because I'm helping other scientists who are on the outside, because they have to have a scientist inside who has been there in the lab, who knows what the problems they are facing, and then he tries to help them as much as possible.
And Katia, turning to you as a commentator, as an analyst, who would you go to more when you're reporting and analyzing science? Do you listen to the outsiders or the insiders?
I think we have to listen to both, to both, because each one has his part in this work, in this job. And as I said in my presentation, if we don't give the hands together, we don't arrive to this solution, because as many of our presenters and speakers in this Congress have already said, and I think in other congresses too, what people want, what we want as human beings is very simple, is to be happy, to have health, a good life, quality of life, be with your family. So for this objective that is simple, so many complexes and complicated things are necessary. And it's difficult. We don't have the points that we don't, we have to link these points, we have to link these actors. So I think both have to be heard.
Thank you. Well, it's time for some questions. Who would like to start us off? There is a gentleman there in the blue jacket. Do we have a microphone? Can we get a microphone? Oh, I think you have to go up to the microphone. Marwan, could we get a roving mic? Yeah, thanks. Could you tell us who you are and where you're from?
Yes. My name is Joachim von Braun. I'm the director of the Center for Development Research, University of Bonn in Germany. We do some science policy research in our center, and I was fascinated by the presentation. I have a quick question to Dr. El-Sherbini and to Mohammed Hassan. Dr. El-Sherbini, you said, I quote, we must carefully set priorities. How are you going about setting priorities in science policy in Egypt in order to maximize net benefits to society? What mechanisms do you use? How do you interact with civil society, with the science community? Essentially, how do you factor in expected long-term benefits versus short-term? I find this a very complex question, and maybe some practical suggestions from you would help. Mohammed Hassan, you have a great overview on who did well in science policy. Can you mention, in terms of countries, some role models in two respects? What are best landscapes of science policy, not just the universities, the academies, but also how to interact with private sector research? Who did well among the developing countries? We recently started a research project at our institute on these questions and found it very difficult to identify sort of optimal landscapes of science policy making. What produces maximum net benefits? What type of landscape in science policy for development? Maybe elaborate a few concrete cases: Malaysia, Indonesia, Kenya, or whatever.
Who'd like to take that first?
Well, I'm going to very clearly describe how we set our priorities in Egypt. I mean, I will take the example of health, for instance. The first thing we do at the beginning is we call it hearing sessions. We bring the officials of the Ministry of Health, and we bring some of the old and wise people who have been working in the field of health. And then we ask them a straight question. What is the priority in terms of health? What is the greatest problem we are facing? And the answer came to us at that time when we were putting the strategy that hepatitis C is our biggest health problem in Egypt, followed by cancer and certain diseases in cancer. So because we don't have so much resources to be able to tackle all the issues, we need to focus on, let's say, one or two of them. So we selected hepatitis C. What's next? What should we do next? The first thing we do is to formulate a small group of people who are specialized in the field of hepatitis C. They create what is called draft zero. Draft zero means that they have been working, finding out the state of the art, what the world is doing, what Egypt has been doing, what our scientists are doing, what is the magnitude of the problem. They put this on a white paper, and then we take that and we go for workshops. 1 or 2 workshops to listen to the expert, what's their opinion about this draft. Then this draft becomes draft 1. The workshop usually is about 15 to 25 people. The third step, we go for what is called the stakeholder meeting. We have more than 500, 200 to 500 people from the field, but they are not experts, but they are from the society, from the media, from the legal departments of different places, scientists, as well as anybody who has anything to do with that problem. And then it becomes the draft 2. We take this draft 2, bring it back to the council, which provided the medical council, polish it, and then eventually we go to what is called the Higher Council for Science and Technology. The Higher Council in Science and Technology in Egypt is chaired by the Prime Minister and include 8 of the ministers who are related to science and technology, coordinated by our ministry, the Ministry of Scientific Research, 6 of our eminent scientists, and 3 from the civil society. And Dr. Stragiddin is with us in this council. Then they approve what we have been saying, modify it a little bit, make sure that we have enough funding to implement it. Then it goes to the Science and Technology Development Fund, or to the academy, or to the ministry, whatever the part who is going to develop the implementation plan. By doing so, the outside world look at us that we have a strategy in that field, like for instance the FP7 program. They come and say, well, you have a plan, and we like this plan. We are going to support this part of it, and we are going to work with you. We put part of this plan with the German cooperation, for instance, with Egypt-France cooperation. So we start utilizing our international cooperation to make sure that this plan is being implemented. We apply this to every priority we have: health, energy, water, agriculture, and food. So it's a mechanism, it's in place, and this is the way how we can make sure that our society at the end will be able to react to the calls when we make. The international society will be involved. Our Egyptian expatriates outside Egypt are also involved. So we try to make sure that they will be owning the plan itself so they can implement it.
Thank you, Mohammed. So an example of one country,
the model. Sorry, the model described by Majid, I think, is an excellent model. And I'm sure that all developing countries would like to adopt a model like this. But the main problem, frankly, this is really excellent, but the main problem is the level of funding. You see, still, despite all these things, Egypt is still spending, I don't know, 0.4%, 0.5% of its GDP.
Well, the money, of course, is absolutely an issue. And this is the problem of the economy. It's not the problem of what we have.
That's right.
The thing is that we take 0.4, but if we have the 0.4 and we try to do everything in the world, we will definitely fail. But we spend on hepatitis C, for instance, almost 100 million out of a 1-year budget. And this is, for Egypt, is a huge amount of money.
Did you want to finish your point, Mohammed?
No, this is what I'm saying. I mean, the point I wanted to make is this is quite applicable to the majority of developing countries. But when it comes to supporting a model like this, they fail to deliver the money. So if look at Africa, for example, the average expenditure on research and development is between 0.2 to 0.3%. So you cannot really implement a model like this in a situation where the government is not funding research to the appropriate level. But I think, coming back to the question, I can name a couple of countries that are really being successful in integrating science and technology to development and making progress. I mean, in Africa, maybe there are not that many examples. Maybe South Africa is probably the only one because it's now spending close to 1% of its GDP on research and development. I can mention Rwanda, but Rwanda is a very small country. It's like a small village in Nigeria. But again, it's really making a very serious effort to develop science and technology and to address issues related to development using innovation, science and technology. But if we move to other parts of the developing world, I would really give a good example of doing this, give Brazil as really a clear example, a very clear example, where the government is very much committed to spending money on research and development, but also the private sector is contributing to research and development. And we see what is the scientific and technological revolutions in Brazil is really due to this combination of government funding and also private sector funding for research and development.
Katia, would you agree? Is Brazil a model?
Yes, of course, I agree with you.
Let's take some more questions from the floor. Hands are going up. There's a lady there in the blue.
السلام عليكم، دكتورة عبير عبد الوهاب، مركز البحوث الزراعية، أستاذ مساعد. أنا هسأل سؤال بالعربي وأرجو من الأستاذ محمد حسن إن هو يترجم السؤال. أو الدكتور ماجد، أنا بيؤرقني سؤال، ليه رجل العلم ما يمسكش الحكومة؟ ليه رجل العلم ما يمسكش الحكومة يحكم؟ هل لو حكم رجل العلم هيحكم كسياسي ثم يطبق العلم أم كعالم ويطبق السياسة؟ ده أول سؤال.
أول سؤال. Thank you very much. I'm going to need some help with translation, but fortunately we have two gents who speak near perfect Arabic.
She would like to empower scientists to become the governing, and if he governs, the scientist, if he governs, will he be a scientist implementing governing, or he will be governing and trying to implement science?
Well,
that's a very good question.
I think it should be both. It should really be both. He should address the concerns of the scientific community because he's a scientist and he knows the problems. He should be addressing those problems, but at the same time, he should also learn how politics behave somehow. If he doesn't understand the game, the political game, he won't be able to achieve anything. So I think I will demand that a person like this should be in both areas. Should be a very good politician and a very good promoter and supporter of science and technology.
Would you agree, Magid?
Politics are in our life. أنا هرد عليه بالعربي عشان هي طالما سألت بالعربي أرد بالعربي يعني. السياسة والعلوم حاجة واحدة. ما نقدرش نفصل بالاثنين. النهارده لو الواحد بقى عالم في المعمل بس ومفيش حد بيراعي له السياسة nothing will happen. لكن لو في واحد بيعمل سياسة وبيحاول بيها إن يسهل مهمة العالم اللي شغال في المعمل هتبقى الأمور ماشية كويس جدا. أنا عشان كده بعتقد إن هو كل واحد فينا حتى اللي بيشتغل في معمله من غير ما يبقى ليه علاقة بالقوانين ولا بالقواعد لازم يكون عنده نوع من السياسة لأنه لازم يتعامل مع زملائه مع المجتمع اللي هو فيه مع رؤسائه مع الناس اللي تحتيه لازم هيكون عنده نوع من البوليتكس هيعملها تحت أي ظرف من الظروف.
But I think your question,
my answer was almost close to what you said, but I tried to.
Your question is also very important in the sense that I think when it comes to interaction and developing the right policies and the right approach, you have the scientific community on one side, the scientists you're referring to, with their own priorities. They want to do research in their lab, they have their own priorities. They can conduct science. If you leave them alone, they can do a good job. And then you have the decision makers and the policy makers with their own priorities that relate to society. And the problem is sometimes these two communities do not interact with each other. You see, the scientists don't know much about the policy issues, and the decision makers don't know much about the priorities of the scientists. So a very healthy situation would be to bring these two groups together somehow so that they can learn from each other.
That's the moment when communication acts.
Exactly.
Is this communication in the whole sense, communication from government to society, from government to science, and you need the communication to make the link, the synapses between all these actors. And when we say communication, everybody communicates since he's born. The baby communicates. He cries, the mother gives him milk. So it's not only communication, but efficient communication. And now that communication has already been studied, and we have theories, we have practices, we have roles in communication, I think we have to increase the knowledge of communication and the practice of communication for that all these actors could be linked to one efficacy. It's to serve society, because government, theories, science, political, everything must be in the service, do you say this in English? Service to the society, must serve society. The most important actor in all this theater, in all this scene, is human being. Is for this human being and his good quality of life that everybody works. Governments exist, politics exist, science exists, everything exists to serve one only person, human being, us, the society. So that's the moment where communication acts, to make this link, to be the instrument, to put everybody in contact with the other, with efficacy.
Thank you. في سؤال تاني بعد إذن.
Can I take another question?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. Yes.
No, from someone else. There are lots of people waiting. Thank you for your question. Appreciate it. Let's move into elsewhere in the audience. And there's a lady.
There's one here, one here, one.
There's a lady there in the front row. If you can raise your hand a bit higher, and then the microphone will get to you. Thank you.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. دكتورة إيمان عبد الله، مركز تكنولوجيا الإشعاع الطاقة الزراعية. بالنسبة للتمويل، احنا هنا في مصر أو في الدول النامية في فجوة كبيرة جدا ما بين الصناعة والبحث العلمي. المصانع كلها عندنا فيها مشاكل لا حصر لها. احنا البحث العلمي ما نعرفش عنه حاجة، وبيروحوا يجيبوا خبراء من بره. ما بدل ما يجيب من بره، طب ما يديني أنا الفلوس وأنا أشتغل عليها. دي بالنسبة للتمويل. في حاجات كمان، المؤتمرات اللي احنا عمالة تحصل كلها بتبقى بذخ، وتبص تلاقي يعني هنا النهارده القاعة فيها كام واحد، واللي جايين كلهم دافعين جايين عشان فسحة. طب ما بدل كده ناخد الفلوس دي ونحطها في معاملنا ونجيب أجهزة ونعرف نشتغل. إنما احنا ولا حاجة، معامل احنا اللي بنشتري على حسابنا وبنعمل كل حاجة، وبعدين بنحط على الرف. بالنسبة للزراعة تبص تلاقي الفلاح في وادي واحنا في وادي.
Thank you. Thank you. Shall we get the panel to respond?
It's not a question.
It's not a question.
There's multiple questions here.
Multiple questions. Good.
I mean, one of them is about that funding should be that between research and industry industry should pay for some of the research being done. Second question is conferences like this cost money, and we should use the money for this conference to do research. Third is that she said that we do everything on our own pockets, and we don't have enough money, and what we do is put on the shelf. So, who would like to answer?
These are not questions.
Let's go some more. I think this is sort of.
I will be very brief. I mean, on the three of them.
Maybe a very brief comment, then we can go back to the audience. Yes.
The first one is that industry relationship with the research is a problem everywhere, not only in Egypt but everywhere else. There is some success stories in some fields, but not in everything, and we need to work hard on this to establish it more. Conferences of that kind is the way that you can voice and communicate with others. Is the way that you can see for the future. Is the way that you know about what's happening in the world. It's the way, so many benefits. We don't have to go around it and say. And it's not waste of money. It's actually more cost effective in anything you would do. This is how you build networks with the outside. Third is that farmers are not doing well with the research. No, I would invite you to come and see the results of the campaigns we are doing with the farmers and how they increase the productivity of more than 30%. And I just like to conclude that even communicating the society is very important, as you rightly said, showing what science has been doing. I mean, we have outside in our academy booth 3D screens where we are putting them in schools now. We are working with the Library of Alexandria, how to promote science to our kids, how to promote science for our society, how we bring them 3D movies so they can be very interactive. It's very important to communicate science in the right way.
And this is education plus communication.
Exactly.
They must be together.
But Megan, maybe I can just do a short sort of follow-up to what the lady was saying and from what you're saying, which is that how do you communicate in the sort of new Egypt where clearly people have found their voice? I think this is almost undoubted. You know, I've been coming to this library for many years, and I've not encountered, you know, such sort of lively sessions.
We have several ways of doing this. Okay,
the point I suppose that I'm making is that how do you communicate the importance of external connections in an environment where that is obviously being questioned, on the television screens everywhere, people are questioning the need for external relationships for Egypt, because Egypt has had external relationships throughout the previous period, and of course it's not been very fruitful for the ordinary public. So, you've got a barrier. How are you going to cross that barrier?
Well, first of all, we are in a situation which is quite unique, different than any other year before. I mean, we are in a year that this room in the BioVision before should be filled up totally. And this is how, because our place now, not so many people, and I thank all the audience who are here today because they had the courage to come and to show their support for Egypt. I think we are in a stage which is of a transition, but it's not always going to be like this. Egypt is a center of attention of everybody. Egypt is blessed with a location that nobody else has. We are part of Africa, we are part of the Arab, we are part of the Mediterranean, we are even Asian country. So we have a long-standing relationship internationally, and we value that very much. And we think we will never be able to achieve our target unless we have links with all the international community. But I think to say how we communicate with the people, and this is very important, especially the youth. Even before the revolution, we created something called the science book, which is similar to the Facebook. So they can interact with us, they can tell us their problem. And even we got an award for this from the US on the way that we thought of it, how it is done. We have about 18,000 who are members of this network now. As well as we make statement for them. As I told you, the Egyptian Young Academy of Science. So there is ways, but we need to listen more. And we need to see more of their problem, and we need to get out of this frustration. I mean, definitely there is plenty of frustration everywhere. I'm sure there is success stories. The frustration need to learn from success stories, and we need to move forward. But we need to listen to it, and this is the right time for that. So,
let's go back to the audience, and you can come back again. I mean, sort of park the idea, and we come back in. Who else now? So lots of hands going up. Yes, the lady with in the white jacket.
Thank you. Dalia Saad, Sudanese, PhD student at Wits University, Johannesburg. I think we all agree that science should be linked to the society, to serve society. But my question is how this could be achieved in developing countries where there is no respect for science, no independence, no democracy, and no freedom, no scientific research freedom. And I think all developing countries don't give enough attention and support for scientific research. So I don't believe that the problem could be solved by qualifying scientists without affording a good work environment. And that is why all the good scientists from developing countries do not work in their home countries, because there is nothing to do. For example, in my country, the budget for the security, for example, is 80%. There is nothing for education, there is nothing for health and other. So I think this is the point. So I think organizations like TWAS, like other organizations, I think should also put attention for this and try to discuss and to sort out, to put attention to this problem and how they can just solve it and simply discuss it even. Thank you.
Thank you. Should we take one more question and then we can come back to the panel? Who else? Let's move to a part of the room where we haven't had any questions. All hands really are going up. The gentleman there at the back. Yes, you, sir. Yeah.
Thank you. My name is Ali Muhammad Ali. I am a chemist in the Medical Insurance Authority. I am graduated from Chemistry Microbiology department, and I have, I think, an important question. Is there a plan from the Egyptian scientists all over the world to build a long-term strategy to extract our resources as an alternative to fund. And rebuild the body of knowledge associations, I mean, instead of searching for external fund, how can we build our fund? And thank you.
Thank you. So sort of two questions similar in some ways, really about funding. I don't know, Kasia, whether you'd like to talk to us a bit about Brazil and science funding, and that might be sort of in
Science funding is the pay,
this is the budget for science and technology,
yes.
where Brazil is.
This is not an area that I know 100%, but usually we have a good investment in good funding in research, and that's what we say. That's my objective here, is to say that these fundings and the result of these fundings and the result of the research that are always very good, because we have good scientists, we have important scientists and responsible scientists. When you have the fundings and have the possibility of paying this work, usually you have good results. What we have to have is we have to have the result, the knowledge of these results arrive onto people for that they can practice, use, and have the benefits of those results. Instead of that, it remains on the shelves. It remains on the laboratories and the shelves on the labs. And we have, so yes, for first question, we have these fundings in Brazil. We have a good, you see, Embrapa is an example of an important Brazilian institution of research in agriculture, and they have been in this Congress many times, so it's only to give one example in Brazil. But what we want is that those results communicate, not only communicate, but to be appropriated by people for their daily problems, for the day by day, for their result, so that they can have the benefits of those fundings, the benefits of this money that have been put in this research, really to arrive to people.
Thank you. Mohammed, what would your advice be to young Sudanese scientists struggling with the dilemmas of expatriatedom and going home?
Well, I very much appreciate the question by the young Sudanese scholar. I am also from Sudan, by the way. I think she mentioned a very, very important fact for everybody to at least reflect on. She mentioned 80%. She is referring to the government expenditure, the budget for the government. 80% of the budget, the government expenditure, goes into the army and the secret police, 80%. And the remaining 10% goes to other sectors, including health, including education, including science and technology, which has the lowest, 20% of the government expenditure. So that is really a situation that is absolutely unique, I think, in the entire African continent. And by the way, this applies, we have two Sudans now. We have South Sudan and we have Sudan. And in South Sudan, it's just the same story. Again, there is a lot of expenditure on the army, on the military. But the question you raise is about how, in a situation like this, we can have science and technology develop. And even if you train excellent scientists, is what you're referring to, and make sure that there are a number of well-trained scientists and leaders, Sudanese leaders, how can you guarantee that they will stay and work in an environment where there is no science, there are no laboratories, there is no research going on? And that's a dilemma. That's a dilemma. I don't know a solution for it. I think your country or our country is really unique in this. And unless we do something about the expenditure itself and reverse this 80%, make 80% for development sectors and 20% for the army, I don't see any hope or any solution.
Margaret, do you have some advice for Sudan?
Well, I think the solution should be imminent in 2 months' time if we have a president who will be believing in science and will put science in his head, like in Brazil, like in Korea, where the president himself felt he's presiding even the committees that are relating to science. If we have from the strongest leadership in the country, we have the commitment to spend on science and technology, not on army, not on other things. And I believe that the message is loud and clear. Everybody is hearing it now. But instead of only talking about it and making a pretty picture with it, you have to do the act itself. We cannot survive on 0.4%. We need to be at least 2%. And we should not be able to do that depending on the government alone. We have to have the private sector. We have to have the NGOs. There is some movement in them now, but not to the limit that we want. And I agree with you, science cannot work unless we improve the environment where the scientists are working. So we need to put our resources to improve this environment. And I think there is a lot of potential, especially in Egypt, with the expatriate scientists living abroad. But we haven't exploited that because they don't see that they will be able to come and work unless the environment is set. And we are trying to set this environment for them to come back or even to circulate their brain. We don't want them to return totally, but at least we want them to circulate the brain.
But Magid, Egypt is clearly a sort of regional power of some size. Would it be possible for scientists from, say, countries in sub-Saharan Africa or elsewhere to come and work in Egypt to be able to build their skills by working in your laboratories and then incubating them, and then they can go back and, and contribute to their countries at home? Is there such a program or a plan?
There is a plan already going and has been going for many years. Egypt every year provides 4,870 scholarships for Africans to come to Egypt. And we are paying a lot of money for this from our own resources. The plan has been going very well, and then over the past few years it went down. And then they wake up, they found out that they are making a big mistake with not supporting the leadership in Africa. Long time ago, every African leadership used to be educated in Egypt, had some time spent in Egypt, and then this connection was cut, but now they are putting back and forth again because there's huge potential in doing this. Africa for us is a strategic partner. And Africa for us is a very important partner, and there is a huge potential for Africa for the future.
At this point, I wonder if I could perhaps bring in Abdullah Dar, who's sat here. Abdullah, if you raise your hand, the mic might come to you. Just perhaps to hear what you might have to say about brain drain, as you're someone with connections to Africa, also to the Middle East, and now for the past decade to Canada. So you're the circulating brain rather than the draining brain.
We published a study in Science about 5 years ago where we looked at diasporas working in Canada. And we asked a number of questions. One is, if you had the opportunity to help your country where you originally came from, would you be interested? And the answer was almost universal. Everybody wants to do that. The second question was related to, are you doing it? And the answer usually was no. And the reason was we don't have a mechanism in which to actualize our desire to help the countries that we come from. So we developed a policy recommendation to the Canadian government to set up a kind of mechanism where diasporas would come together. The government of Canada would facilitate that. And there would be a kind of help to the countries where people came from in terms of either taking students to become graduate students in Canada under the leadership of those academics, or for those academics to go for a short while to the countries where they came from to provide skill sets in education, in management, in entrepreneurship, and so on. That mechanism has not materialized, but the argument that we made was that this is a win-win situation for Canada, because this is another kind of diplomacy. An outreach program in which you use Canadian talent of foreign origin to help their own country, which will be at very low cost to Canada. And I think this is something that we need to push further in the future through academies of science and so on, with the idea of the brain recirculation. There is another interesting thing. We know that a lot of doctors trained in Africa, for example, end up in foreign countries. There is a mythology that, for example, there are more Malawian doctors in Birmingham than in the whole of Malawi, or something like that. That particular figure has been disputed, but the point is true, that a lot of doctors from, and other healthcare professionals go and work abroad. So the question is, this seems to be unstoppable. Why not think, turn the issue round? The United States is going to require 1 million nurses over the next 10 years because the population is aging, theoretically. The figure may be higher or lower. Why not Kenya say, look, come and build nursing schools in Kenya to train nurses at a standard that will serve you in the United States, then employ them and take them. Because a lot of Kenyans are unemployed, take them and they will be sending money back to help the economy later. But a certain percentage of those nurses can stay in Kenya, and you work out a way of doing that. It's not easy, but it can be done. You could do that for doctors too. You turn the issue upside down and say, it's not about a brain drain, let's now make it a brain gain through this mechanism. And there are other ways of thinking about this unstoppable thing, which is a problem, but to think about creative solutions like the ones I've talked about.
Thank you very much. Let's take some more questions from the audience. You've had your turn, madam. I'm sorry, I'm going to have to give you a miss. Let's take some people who've not had their opportunity yet. And there is the gentleman in the front row here in the red tie, yes. And we'll take a couple of questions.
Yeah. I was just wanting to comment, Mr. Dar, Dr. Dar. The problem is that...
Can you tell us who you are and where you're from?
My name is John Carvalho, and I'm from Brazil. And I'm the happy husband of Katia. Okay. And the problem is of bringing the people back is that they get used, the scientists and the students get used to the good environment for research that they find in the developing countries where they're studying. And you have to provide the same kind of environment. Happily, we have some universities in Brazil that do that already. So we've been lucky enough to bring good scientists from all over the world, Brazilian scientists that were outside Brazil. But in most countries, the building of this infrastructure, and not only infrastructure, it's also a structure of brains. You have to relate. A scientist wants to relate to his peers next door. He wants to have a pride to talk to this people that they can exchange ideas. And that's really a problem in developing countries.
Thank you. Let's take some more questions now. And there's a gentleman there in the glasses. Thank you very much. And if you could tell us, please, your name and who you are and where you work.
محمد أحمد حسين، مدير عام الإعلام جهاز شؤون البيئة لوسط الدلتا. الحقيقة أنا بتكلم من اسمحوا لي أتكلم بالعربي يعني حتى أوصل ما أريد توصيله. يعني بالرجوع اللي عرضه الدكتور عبد الله دار واللي عرضه الدكتور شريف أنديل واللي عرضته ضيفتنا الكريمة من البرازيل. فكرة أن نجعل البيئة اللي هي بتمثل مجموع المجتمع قابلة لاستيطان العلوم. في مشكلة حقيقية أشار لها كثير من السائلين قبلي حوالين إنه المجتمع منفصل ومنعزل عن ما يجري في اتجاه تحديث أو اتجاه مؤتمرات أو اتجاه بحوث حتى. في نقطة لازم تراعى أن نجعل من المجتمع حاضن للعلم بكل المفردات، من أول التجارب المتصلة بأبنائنا الطلاب لحد الجمعيات الأهلية، لحد أن الجامعة يكون لها تواصل وكذلك المراكز العلمية بما فيها مكتبة اسكندرية لازم يكون لها تواصل ممتد، لا تكون جذر منعزلة. لا يمكن أن يكون التلفزيون المصري على سبيل المثال بكل قنواته وكل خسائره الفادحة لا يملك لا برامج علمية ولا قنوات علمية، والآخر بنتكلم على سياسي ممكن يكون عالم أو عالم يكون سياسي، وفي النهاية مش هنوصل لده لأن البيئة كلها عبارة عن بيئة رافضة لفكرة العلم حتى في أبسط صوره. لو نماذج زي اللي عرضها الدكتور عبد الله دار حصلت في مصر هنجد من السخرية أكثر من التشجيع. المسألة ليست يعني أنا كنت في ندوة في إحدى كليات التربية بتكلم، كان موضوع اللي بشيره عن الضوضاء، فبقول بتوع التربية كليات التربية كيف لا يتأتى أن يكون كلنا صوتنا عالي وتكون حتى المناحات السياسية اللي حاصلة نتاج لهذا، لأنه عندنا في كلية التربية بتطلع معلم الطالب اللي قدامه لازم يبقى صوته عالي عشان يثبت إنه نابه من أول طابور الصباح لحد الدروس. شكرا.
Thank you very much. Who's going to help me out?
We need his translation.
I know. You're doing two jobs. You know you're an outsider now. You're not an insider.
He was not supposed to be the translator too.
But I will answer that. I'll be gladly answering. Is that he said that we need to have all the stratum of the society in this room, so they are able to listen, and all the conferences they have to be there. Students, media, NGOs, they have to be present and connected with the science itself, because nobody is listening to the scientists from the society. And he gave an example of the noise, and that because he's from the environmental agency, I believe. And then they talking about that they are teaching the student to raise their voice very loudly in the school, so they become a genius when they're raising their voice. And this is the way that even in schools they are educating in a different way that it should be. So this was his question: how we can bring together society with the community of science to understand what's going on.
Anyone like to take that, or shall we maybe take another question? Let's take another question.
We'll answer at them because we are very close to 5 minutes.
We have a little bit, yeah. Let's take maybe one more question, then we'll go do a round robin of the panel. So one final question from a part of the room which has remained silent. Yes, that gentleman there in the black jacket there. If you can keep your hand raised while the microphone gets to you. Thank you. And please tell us your name and where you're from.
My name is Abdullah Mugi, Faculty of Pharmacy, Alexandria University. My question: there are a lot of conferences are held, many ideas, many theories to change the situation in Egypt, but the critical question: from which point we can start? From which point? From school, from culture, from politics? From which point? Thank you.
For which point we need to have the start? So we start from school, start from culture.
Katia, would you like to take that question and just some closing thoughts, based on what you've heard?
Really, your question is excellent, because really we know what we have to do, but we think where to begin, who begins. I think a congress like this one, and in this way, I have to say to the lady that these congresses are for this. They cost money, they have sponsors, but it's the moment to change ideas, to rise ideas. Is the moment to tell our point of views, even if you are contrary to other points. But this is a moment to the reflection, to think about what to do. We see that we have a consensus that we must link science and society. This is a consensus. Everybody is agreed about that. But how to do it? And your question, where to begin? By whom we have to begin? I think it's a collective beginning. But especially society must will, must wish, must desire this. Because when society desires, when society wants, things happen. And political situation all over the world shows that. When society, when the population, when people want something, things happen. maybe with prejudice, maybe with death, maybe with many problems, but things happen. So I think we must begin by this movement of our society, but really by all the actors together. We have here the representative of sciences. We have in this auditorium representative of society. We have communication present too, with people we are turning, with people like me, like others, who works in communication. So I think it's time to a collective start, because we can. We know that science has very, very good conclusion, results, and discoveries. Everybody knows that. And we know that society needs all that. So let's begin. Let's begin. Let's enhance let's improve, let's increase the communication, the link, the synapses, or whatever, between all us, among all us, and we can do it.
Thank you, Katia. Magid, some closing words?
First of all, a comment on Canada, that the mechanism, how we can attract the scientists. And Canada specifically is one of the countries where lots of Egyptians are there, and they are in a very high-ranking places. And we are appreciative to this. We have links that are going on, but they are individual links. Second, we have a mechanism that is, in a way, not appropriate for the, let's say, Egyptian expatriates. We have a program called Tokten. We can ask the institution to name whoever they want to bring back for a few short period of time, 2, 3 weeks, 4 weeks. We provide the tickets, and they provide a very small stipend for that person. This mechanism works. I mean, we are able to bring every year maybe 300 people coming for 3 weeks and going back. It's not a small number. But is this what we really need? No. What we really need is more than that. We ask Canada to support a mechanism for chairs of excellence. So the scientists can come here for not 3 weeks to 6 weeks, no, stay for 1 year, 2 years, build a school around them, and we cannot afford his salary he's getting in Canada. So we are saying we will provide the equipment, we provide the infrastructure, we provide the students, we provide the ticket, we provide whatever is needed, but his salary should be on somebody else, because we cannot give a salary and make a disparity between the people working. So we are waiting for the response from Canada on this, and we hope we get a favorable one. We will have plenty of people who will be able to work through this mechanism. And we are in fully support of doing something like that. Brazil is a country who have put in place the biotechnology, the information, the space. That's why you make the breakthrough, as well as you are putting huge amount of fund to be able to make that happen. And I think that the BRICS is the future. Brazil is one of the leading countries in this, and they were able to utilize their links with the US in a very good way. And I totally agree with the people here. People will never come back and be able to work unless the environment we have is suitable for them to work. And I finally answered the last question, which we should have begun the session with, where to begin. I think beginning in believing in science, that it will do the work. We need to believe in ourselves, the scientists. The society needs to believe in the scientists, and then we will identify together what is the problem we need to work on, we make a success story, and then we expand. I think that this is the way to do it.
Finally,
okay,
Mohammed.
just a couple of final observations. First, I think this idea of chairs is an excellent idea. But there is a Canadian, I don't remember his name, who has been going around, and is a very famous Canadian who is actually supporting or trying to get support for 1,000 chairs, just like the chairs that you just mentioned, Majid, for Africa. And he's projecting a budget of something like $500 million to support these chairs. He's still moving around and talking about it, but it is something I think is important. But the brain drain, of course, is a real issue. But the brain circulation, as Majid mentioned, I think is what we can afford. And this is not asking our expatriates or our diaspora to come and live in Africa, but asking them to come for a couple of months, go back and come back again. And I think this is a very, very important model, which is actually working in a number of countries. Take this country, for example. I think the best example I can give you is people like Ahmed Zuhail or Farouk Albaz, who come here very frequently, and they help the scientific community in various ways. And there are many, many excellent examples all around the world, but this is really what we should desire. But I want to come back to the young scientists, because I think if there is any future, especially for the poor countries like my country, Sudan, in science and technology, this future has to come from the young scientists. And that's why mobilizing the young scientists is probably the most important initiative. Our network, IAP, the network of academies of science, has actually supported in the last 2 or 3 years the establishment of young academies. And here is an example in Egypt. Egypt is going to have a young academy. And by the way, this young academy is not for everybody. It's very selective. It's merit-based. They select the best young scientists under the age of 40, but the membership is not permanent. The membership is only for 5 years. So after 5 years, you graduate and a new class comes in. So that these academies are always young, are always below the age of 45. Always below the age of 45. Sudan, by the way, has established a young academy many years ago, and is extremely active, even more active than the senior academy. So I think this is really the trend that we should support. We mobilize the young scientists to do the work. And this is really their future, the future of science and the future of the young scientists.
Well, on that note, I would like to thank our panel. Just before I do, a quick, for those of you like me who are addicted to science policy, the science policy junkies, there is a final installment in the trilogy of today. And at 5 o'clock, we're going to be talking about Egypt in specific. So I've tried not to steer too many of the questions today about Egypt, because at 5 o'clock, we're going to go deep into the future of science and innovation policy in Egypt. We are going to be privileged to have Maged El-Shabini back with us, to be bravely grilled by all of you. And we'll also have Michael Bond, who's a writer from the United Kingdom, works for New Scientist magazine. Michael's in the audience. You want to wave your hand, Michael? And he's going to be presenting some findings that he's been involved in. He's been doing a survey of science and innovation in Egypt over the past year. And in particular, I'm looking forward to hearing what Michael has to say. That's 5 o'clock, and that's in the lecture hall. In the meantime, I'd like to thank Kati Shalita, Maged El-Shabini, Mohammed Hassan, and all of you for all your extremely interesting and often provocative questions. And we'll see you, or at least some of you, at 5 o'clock. Thank you.